Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is influencer marketing and how to build successful brands.
I mean, David Steinberg is a tough act to follow here, but I think, and I wouldn't say they saved the best for last, they saved some of the most creative for last. So here we are, we have Bryan, Michael, Heather, and Bryan. I want you guys to introduce yourselves because I could not do you guys justice, and I mean that sincerely. And then we're gonna get into some, I think, some very interesting topics as it relates to influencer marketing, but really how these folks have gotten into it and how they thought about the career paths that they've taken and how it's really influenced where they are right now. Because in some ways, your creativity and your individuality is the thing that has made you, rise above your industries, I think, in itself. And I'm sure many of your peers would give their left, you know what, or whatever it is, to have the exposure that you do, not just with consumers, but for some great brands. So if you could start us off, just quick intro down the line here.
My name is Bryan Callen. I'm a stand-up comic and an actor, and I have to step my fashion game up because this is just a thing of beauty right here. Blackson is the guy I want to be. So I'm turning it over to you.
Hello, my name is Michael Blackson, stand-up comedian, actor, originally from Ghana, West Africa, raised in Philadelphia, and now live in Los Angeles. No, I'm not a pimp. I am a comedian.
You can be both.
I'll pass it on to Britney Spears.
Hi, I'm Heather Moussa. I'm on a show called Selling Sunset on Netflix and also on HGTV and Discovery, The Flipping El Moussas.
Hi guys, I'm Bryan Decker, a serial entrepreneur in the finance and kind of green energy space, and then really kind of built my name through kind of increasing consumers' financial IQ through creating content and kind of what the school leaves out that people want to know every day.
All right. Well, listen, I mean, one of the things I think is so interesting, I do a program on CNBC, and, I start out in finance, and I kind of style myself not as nearly as good as these guys on the influencer front, because really people are not that interested in the market when it comes down to it. When you think about brands, though, they really have to identify with people and values and really things that pop off the page a little bit. So I'm curious, we do have some entertainers. You grew up, you probably wanted to get in front of a stage or in front of an audience and that sort of thing, but at some point you guys realized that you could actually go beyond the industry in which you were in entertainment. Now, Bryan, you on the end or in a different scenario. So I'd love to start with Heather for a second because, when you think about the industry in which you're in, the exposure that you have is truly amazing and people are drawn to you, but they're also drawn to your personality. I'm sure they're drawn to your skill set. Talk to us, what was the inflection point for you when you realized that you weren't just going to be selling homes, you know what I mean, to people, that you really wanted to create a brand around that, and then you were able to leverage that in multiple different ways?
Yeah, so I had a platform before I was on Selling Sunset from modeling, but obviously my platform grew from the TV shows. So I was able to grow my platform to over 3 million followers on Instagram and then across the other boards as well. But I love to engage with my audience, and I love to be as real as possible with my audience. So I like to be myself. I like to ask them questions. What do they want to see? And it's just been such a great experience for me to be able to connect with them. And what was the other question?
Well, no, I mean, was there an inflection point at some point where, listen, putting on a show and entertaining people and that's one thing, but being able to translate it into this, and then doing it in a way that's scalable, I think is really interesting. So I'm just curious, at one point, how did you think about that?
Well, that takes time, and honestly, I use my social media as a business, and I think that's how you have to look at it these days, and you can work with brands to help scale their business as well, and influencers have a platform that it's so incredible at this point for marketing and for brands and companies, so I was able to scale it in a way that wasn't always possible for me years and years ago, and now I'm at a point in my career where I can say no to other brands and no to things that don't align with myself, and I'm very authentic with the brands I choose to work with, and so I've learned to say no to a lot of things.
So Bryan Decker, on the end here, I mean, you obviously, you're an entrepreneur, right? And so there must have been an inflection point for you where you said, and I think this group is going to be really interesting, like to hear how you thought about this. Putting yourself out there to the world on these platforms, you know what I mean? That's something that takes some guts, because a lot of your peers are not doing that, especially in your industry a little bit. So I'd love to hear how you thought about that and what you thought it could do for your business.
Yeah, I think one thing I started to really realize is as you start to create content, I learned that it was going to be the actual most genuine and authentic way to deliver advertising where somebody didn't feel like they were being sold. And so what I focused in on, and I love to say, if you create content for everyone, you're creating content for no one. And what I began to realize is if I give these people value, and I really deliver them a sense of value, and I build that connection with that audience, through kind of the law of reciprocity, it ends up beginning to pay dividends. And when that starts to unfold, you build these relationships that are built on trust. And then brands started reaching out to me to target my specific avatar. Because I think some of the most successful influencers in the space, they focus on a specific niche. Heather and home, them in comedy. Bryan has an unbelievable podcast. And when you focus in on that niche, it gives a brand or an advertiser the ability to hyper-target the exact avatar that they're looking for and deliver that message in a very organic way through an influencer, in a fact that's coming from peer to peer, not business to consumer. And once I started to really understand that, I realized that creating content was kind of our generation's version. And I always like to say I like to learn the lessons from my grandfather, but I want to invest in the things that my kids are interested in. And I began with 2 young kids. They think YouTube is reality, right? Whereas my grandparents thought the newspaper was reality. And so by understanding that medium, that's why I decided to really focus and shift to creating content to deliver that message.
So Michael, Bryan just mentioned authenticity, and I think you scream it a little bit here. Talk to us a little bit, because you're an entertainer, but and a lot of your peers, again, have chosen not to go down the path, or at least attempt to do some of the things that you and this Bryan have done in your field. So I'm just curious, for you, what was the sort of inflection point? And I guess a theme throughout this is, like, if you guys are creating original, authentic, content that connects with consumers, then it's monetizable, right? And that's why you guys have attracted some great brands, brands like that are in the audience here. So I'm curious, Michael, how did you think about that, going from entertainer, but also to influencer and monetizing that influence?
Definitely. It all started, I think, in 2010 when Twitter first came out. Prior to Twitter, I think Facebook was the last thing we had, and I remember having about 5,000 followers on Facebook. I entertained my 5,000 every day. I was satisfied. I was good. And then Twitter comes out, and everybody just started going on Twitter. And I was 6 months late. I was 6 months behind Kevin Hart and Lil Duval, all my fellow comedians. I was behind. And finally, I got on there. I said, let me figure out a way where I could talk to people every day, and let me figure out the best way to deal with my audience. My audience are all rude. All my audience are going to hell. Majority of my fans' biz are going to hell.
Amen.
They are strippers, and they just, everybody that follows me has a 200 credit score right now.
Yes.
So I said, how can I get these people to come on board, and how can I grow? And my fans are mean. All my fans are mean. So I started to do this thing on Sunday on Twitter where just roast Michael Blackson. So, so I just, and whoever roast, the funny roast, I repost and it kept growing. I mean, these guys said some mean things. One guy told me I look like under the bed. That's very dark. Another guy told me the difference between me and midnight is 11:59. Another guy told me when God said, let there be light, I was out of town. They told me Stevie Wonder sees me every day. That's very dark. They told me if Black lives matter, mine matter the most. So when I hear these jokes, I retweet them. They kept laughing. That's how my fan base kept growing. And then eventually I'm at 100,000 followers on Twitter, and now they want to pay me. I had no idea I could make money off of just followers. So, and the most important thing as a comic is just keeping yourself relevant. When something happens, you talk about it right away. And that's one thing I always did. I always kept myself relevant in the business. And I'm not sure if you're still on strike or not, but I have a TV show on BT Plus. Go and check it out. Tyler Perry gave me my own show recently, so now I've got more place to entertain my fans as well on a daily basis.
That's a tough act to follow here, Bryan.
Yeah.
And you're a funny guy because you had me cracking up just back there in the green room a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about your journey through this.
Well, I think, there are a lot of challenges. Well, the one constant is comedy, and I kind of fell into this thing where I work with different brands because I think that there are so many brands that they're trying to get their message across. But I think when it comes to authenticity, if you get people laughing, they trust you. There's something very honest about that. So if I want you to buy my product, I don't know why more brands don't harness people. Like, I'm friends with the funniest people on the planet. And the way I market myself is I say, look, you have a brand. I can make your brand relevant, provided I believe in it and stuff. But I've got friends that sit around, and when we're not performing, we're making each other laugh. That is a skill set that I can apply to your brand. So hire me to sit here and come up with funny ways to get content out there where people are associating your brand with funny. And that's what Geico did. I don't know anything about Geico. I would buy Geico insurance just because they make me laugh and there's something about that I trust. And that was the light bulb for me. I went, why are more brands not using people like myself? So what I do now, and I just kind of fell into this, is I just get on the phone with different brands and I come up with funny ideas that I think could sell their product, just to get people to watch and think about that stuff. But the larger problem I think all of us are starting to have in terms of staying relevant is funny is a constant. As a comic, I'm always writing jokes. I'm always going to come up with something. I do a special. I got to come. You got to start with square one, come up with a whole new idea, and not repeat yourself. That's fine. But more importantly, I look at all of this. We are inundated with more and more information, more and more content. It's like a fast-moving river. And getting people to stop and grab whatever you're offering in this fast-moving river is really the trick. It's one thing to have people look at your content. It's another thing to have them pause and click through and buy what you're selling. That, I think, is a challenge that seems to get, bigger and bigger for everyone.
Yeah.
How do you stay relevant? How do you get people to just pause on what you are offering? And I don't think that challenge seems to be going away. I think it's getting more and more difficult.
It's funny, you said comedy is a constant. Most people are not that funny, let's be frank, okay? Right? And so when I think about you, Heather,
Saying I'm not funny?
No, well, you might be, but you're definitely smart and you're definitely sexy. And so, you're selling something different. Is that fair to say? I mean, yours is it's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. You also talked about values. So, talk to us how you integrate that as you think about working with brands, because it seems like that's something very important to you. And I know that Bryan on the end said something very similar too. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, well, health is very important to me. I'm plant-based, so I choose to not work with brands that don't align with those values as well. I'm also a new mother. I have an 8-month-old son, so I work with brands that I align with that as well. So it's just been important for me to be authentic to myself. I'm not going to put out something out there that I don't truly use or believe, and that's how I stay true to my audience as well and my fans. And they come to me for specific content. They know when they come to my page of what they're going to get. And I also ask them, what do you want? What do you want to see? What can I create for you? And on a daily basis, that's what I do. I'm always creating for them, and I just want to be true. So if I mess up during a brand deal, I laugh through it, or I giggle, or I just have fun with it, and my fans come to me because they know that I'm real. So I guess I
think that's a really important point, because when you're building a brand, if you take the short money and if you think you can pull a fast one, I promise you're going to get found out. So the one thing about building a brand is if you're going to align yourself with a product, you better believe in it. You better use it, or you better know about it, because I think very quickly your audience, if they think you're being sold to, good luck, man. Good luck.
Yeah.
That's the same with a brand. You don't want to work with an influencer that doesn't align with them. And, just because you have 10 million followers or 20 million followers, they might not align themselves with that company. And people see through that. They know when it's not real, and then it'll flop. So you have to choose influencers that are doing that type of content that your brand has.
Yeah. Let's talk about platforms a little bit, because I know that, a lot of these brands, and some of these, some of the content is meant to be ephemeral, but some of these platforms are also ephemeral. So Michael, you talked about how you started on Twitter and you had a small audience on Facebook, which is kind of interesting. Going back 13 years, Facebook was really the only game in town. And when you think about, 3 billion monthly active users on that platform, and Twitter has really never gotten meaningfully above, call it 300 million monthly active users. And to me, and maybe this is my bias, it feels like it's really going away. It doesn't feel like it's a place for authentic sort of, influencer brand stuff. How are you thinking about the platform? I'd love to hear from all of you guys, because forget about what's hot right now, what's working for you right now. Where do you think it's going? And because that's what I think a lot of folks in the audience probably care about right here and now. These are quick hits, right? and I'm sure it helps you kind of maintain relevance, but having a long-term plan about platforms. Do you think about that,
He
Michael?
doesn't need anything. He's got that.
I know it.
Well, I'm currently very active on Instagram. I have about 5.9 million followers on Instagram. And, prior to recently, I recently built a school in my village. So prior to building a school and trying to clean up my act, the things I saw was like sex toys and Viagra pills, Those guys reached out to me because I had that rough fan base. But recently I've cleaned up my act, and now I'm just trying to more concentrate on more easier things and much nicer things. So what I usually tell, if somebody hit me up about promoting some sex toy, I'm like, well, I want 50,000. I tell them something ridiculous, I'll turn them away, But I think it's important. You have to just keep the right brand,
But is it where you have the most following and the most engagement? Is that what is it like a moth to flame in a way? Or do you start seeing, because and people in finance and in tech, it was just Twitter for the most part for years. And then the engagement just started to drop off, as soon, so I'm just curious, like, are you always thinking about what's next? Because my view is like, there's never going to be, or at least for another decade, another billion user platform that exists.
It's going to be tough. I mean, TikTok is doing pretty well,
Well, no, other than TikTok, obviously, which is the monster.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But so curious, Bryan Decker, on the end, like, how do you think about it? Because you come from a sort of a different thing. You're not trying to make people laugh and that sort of thing. You're kind of, is LinkedIn a thing for you, or?
I think what you have to do, so I'm really focused in on short form content, and I deliver that mostly through YouTube Shorts and really primarily on Instagram. And I think what happens, there's not one right platform. What you have to understand is, who is your target audience, right? And so for me, what I've used, so my brother was a machine learning developer, and so what I tapped in is, I'm not a celebrity, and I had to figure out a way as a finance kid from a very small town how to get people to watch me. And so I said, well, what I need to do is to really utilize tech and machine learning. So what I did is when ChatGPT really first started coming out, I developed buyer personas using ChatGPT. And what that allows you to do is you can actually go in there and create like a real life version of your avatar in ChatGPT. And what it'll do is it'll tell you, how they feel, what they like, what triggers, what they're watching, what platform they like to use. I mean, it is literally like a person, and you can name them. And so, for an example, I know in my avatar is going to be 28 to 36-year-old professional males, as well as working mothers, because I am trying to teach them a way to really create wealth to pass on to their family and to kind of change the things that the education system should be teaching people in high school and college. And so by creating these different buyer personas in ChatGPT, it allows me to really hyper-focus on what platforms, what type of content, and what type of short-form content I should be delivering, because now with the integration with Bing, you can actually have real-time data, right? So if I want to go in there, who Mike is a 32-year-old insurance broker, and I want to ask him, hey, I want to deliver Mike some information about understanding the best insurance for his family, for an example. How should I deliver that to Mike? It'll tell me how I should deliver it to Mike, and then it'll also tell me what platform I should use. And then what I do is use my brain and answer the public to find out questions, and then I curate my content on that, so I'm not guessing, because I think for so long, we kind of guess and we hope our content hits, and then we're like, why didn't it hit? And that's the hardest thing as a content creator. And I think a lot of the machine learning has really helped us identify that for that specific target audience.
Yeah, and Bryan Callen, I'm
got-
not calling you old, but
Yeah.
you're kind of old school.
Right.
And so when you
I have
talk about
tight-fitting skin.
working on content, it seems like you're like the guy who like to workshop it in a
that's
comedy
no,
club or
yeah,
something like that,
so,
right?
So there's comedy, but the challenge all of us are facing is that, have you noticed that Saturday Night Live, I'm old enough to remember when Saturday Night Live was a cultural force. When you'd come to the office and you would recite like the characters or the sketch. Sketch doesn't work anymore because the internet is a sketch, because real life is funnier. It's more entertaining. So if you're coming up with fictional comedy or you're coming up with a commercial, the minute you show up with a commercial that's glossy, that's shot really well, all of us go, can't do it, I'm too busy, no. We've gotten to a point where, my daughter is, at 11 years old, read the Lord of the Rings. I remember I walked by her and she was watching the movie. I try to connect with her, which is impossible because she's 15 now. She hates me. But when she was 11, I said, it's a book. And my daughter went, that's 3 books? And I was like, I know. And then I tried to read it, but it's 1,200 pages, which she read in a month or 2 months, which is insane. I don't even think she's related to me. But and I thought to myself, 1,200 pages for me right now, my brain is so tick-tocked out that if I tried to read 1,200 pages, I would be visibly older by the time I was done. We have gotten to a point, and this is a confession. If you send me a text that takes up my whole screen, I'm like, I can't. I'll skim it. I'll get to it on the weekend. This is too much. And we're all that way, and that is a problem. I don't think that's good for our culture, but that is the reality, and that's the challenge. How do we cut through our caterpillar, or what is it, a flea that can't keep a thought in its head for? Well, I'm not an entomologist. I apologize, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But that's literally where we're headed, and I don't think that's good for us. But if you're in business and you want people to buy tickets, or you want people to buy your widget, this is the challenge. This is the challenge. How do we get, and I think the answer lies somewhere in authenticity.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, so that's a key theme I think we've hit on here. And let's looking out in the audience, there's probably a lot of folks who've been in the marketing game for a while, and they haven't gone down the influencer route, if you will. So we don't have a lot of time left. We have about 5 minutes here. I'd love for each one of you guys to share an example for someone who's out there, okay, and they have a brand that they know they have dollars that need to move into other, formats of marketing. Give an example where you've done something for a brand that might have been skeptical and it really worked. And maybe, Michael, I'll start with you.
I can't sell bleaching cream. That's gonna be tough, man.
Bitcoin?
I can't sell bleaching cream, but
I was gonna say, like, we can all go down the crypto coins that you guys promoted over the last few years if you want to start that way. That was a joke.
Dogecoin, guys.
Okay.
Now hear me out.
All right. So, yeah.
I'll go while you think. It's not something that I didn't know wouldn't work, but I can tell you something as far as aligning with authenticity when companies are trying to figure out who to work with or what to do. When I was pregnant, I worked with a company called Baby Leto, and it's furniture for nurseries. And I was pregnant, so I was showing the room of how I was going to decorate my son's room. And obviously that did really well because I was pregnant at the time, so the audience really related to that. 3 months postpartum, I shot with a company called Cupshe. It's a bikini brand, a bikini company, pretty well known. And I was 3 months postpartum, which it's not really fun getting in a bikini when you just had a baby, but I was very proud of myself, proud of my body, and proud of what I just did with my body, pushing out a child. And so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to empower myself, empower other women. And the campaign was around body, being like loving your body. So I really pushed that. And the other women that were shooting with me, they were mothers. One of them was pregnant. So, is just love yourself. And the brand was very happy with everything.
Yeah, authenticity and putting yourself out there. Michael, do you want to?
Definitely. I agree with authenticity, and I think we have a very short extension. Our brains, we make a long story longer, man. Just 1 second, okay? I just flew in from Ghana today. The reason why I was in Ghana, I went to meet up with a company that was trying to sell an energy drink, all right? And they wanted me to be face of the drink. It just happened a couple of days ago. The company is, the drink is called Power Mandela. It's an energy drink called Power Mandela. I was excited about it. I'm a big fan of Nelson Mandela, of all he's done, all the great things he's done. But then get to find out this particular company didn't want to pay the fee to use Mandela's name. So these guys found a bootleg Mandela in the village and asked me, hey, and they got this guy, got him passport, flew him down. His name is Mandela, so we're going to use him. And I found out in the middle of the meeting, and I said to myself, I cannot be part of this. And I had to turn it down. Yeah. So you have to make sure you pick the right things that really fits you. And
what about you?
Well, so it's funny because there's a company called Magic Mind, and it's like a 5-hour energy shot that's just natural. Now, my buddy and I were on the podcast, and we have a podcast, Fighter and a Kid, and it's got a pretty loyal following. And he drank it, and I drank it. And I looked at him and I said, he was a UFC fighter, a heavyweight, and he's got cauliflower. He's just giant. He's just he'd kill you with his bare hands. And so he's usually a teddy bear, but there was a forward tilt to his. He was just a little bit more aggressive. Eyes were a little more open. And I looked at him. I was like, "Hey, you're a little aggressive." And he goes, "I just feel great." And I said, "What happened?" He goes, "Bro, I took one of those Magic Minds." I go, "I told you." And I said, "Me too." And we were just talking about how Magic Mind, which is this mushroom tincture, really works. And it was invented by a guy I know who had a heart condition. He couldn't drink coffee anymore, so he invented an alternative to coffee. So we just had this candid conversation about how Magic Mind is making both of us feel a little bit like Superman. They took that clip and played it, and they got more ROI on that clip than any commercial to date.
Yeah.
To date. And then they became a sponsor, by the way, because they were like, dude, you guys talk about this. And then I said really quickly, I said, when we do ads for you on the podcast, we will talk about it organically if it comes up, as opposed to, let's take a break, our sponsor. People go like this. Oh, good, fast, click, click, click.
Yep. No, I mean, I think the integration, brand integration into the content is really important. I know, Heather, it seems like something that you do, but Bryan, really quickly, you do it through education also, which I think is really important.
Yeah, so it was a company called Greenlight, which is basically a finance app that kids get paid and can track their chores. And so they reached out to me and I said the same thing that Bryan said. I will never run sponsored ads that somebody knows it. And so I was talking to my son and I basically created a video where my son was, you basically pay your kids whatever their age is times, $1, and that's what they get for, doing a full 2 days of chores, whatever you set it as. And so my son was sitting there, who's 7, and he's like, "Dad, how am I ever going to have more money than my sister, who's 9? She makes more money than me." And I said, "Well, let me explain something. Slater, what happens if your sister doesn't do her chores and you do all of her chores? What happens?" He's like, "Well, I have more money." I said, "Exactly." I said, "The other way, now what happens if you do all your chores and you offer and volunteer to do your sister's chores? What happens?" He goes, "I have more money." And I said, "What happens if you guys make the same, but your sister goes to Target and she wants to buy a bunch of things and you save it?" And he goes, "I have more money." I said, "That's real life, son. You can work harder than somebody that makes more money than you and save it. You can spend less money than somebody that makes more than you that can save it." And so that was what the whole thing was about. And then at the end, basically I just said, "Hey, if you guys want to know the app I'm using to track all this, just shoot me a DM." And we did like 12,000 in like less than a week for them, and they were just a relatively new startup because it was very organic and relatable.
Yeah, well, that was great. And listen, we could have gone on forever, but we're out of time. And I just want to thank David Steinberg and his amazing team at Zeta for what a great day of content. I know there's a lot of fun stuff left to do here, but obviously, Bryan, Michael, Heather, and Bryan, thank you guys so much for being on this panel. It was great.
Thank you.